the Middle East is still in a critical state. Following the attacks by Hamas terrorists and Hezbollah, Israel has begun to make extensive use of its air force. Israel's army consists of 589 planes, 191 helicopters, and 32 unmanned aerial vehicles. 60 Israeli jets were launched today to efficiently destroy Hamas sites using this equipment. The majority of the aircraft in this fleet are F-16 fighter jets. This is costing Iranian-backed extremist groups a lot of money. Recently, the Israeli Air Force carried out over 200 strikes in Gaza's Rimmel and Khan Yunis districts as part of an operation started in response to the Hamas attack. According to reports, these strikes destroyed a considerable number of Hamas militant units and military equipment. Rimmel and Khan Yunis are regarded as the primary coordination points for Hamas strikes. In other words, Hamas was unable to prevent Israeli F-16 jets from bombing one of its primary offices during these attacks. Meanwhile, Israeli Air Force transport jets Karnov and Shimshon flew Israeli soldiers from abroad to take part in the operation. Israel is collecting its army in preparation for a significantly stronger reaction to Hamas strikes. The operation to clear the Hamas headquarters is still ongoing. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned of a generational backlash in the aftermath of last Saturday's militant killing, while the IDF bombed the militant group's deployment locations in Gaza. Meanwhile, the Haf Ashkelon Regional Council claimed in a statement that police and military were involved in a shootout with at least one gunman near the Trans-Israel pipeline junction south of the seaside city. As these vital attacks continue, Israel Defense Forces chief spokesman Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari stated that targeting senior Hamas officials is a major goal. This is quite conceivable since, while Israel's 60 fighter jets are hitting targets, particularly in the Gaza Strip, Israeli forces are also on the ground in case militant organizations relocate. To put it another way, Israel is waging a ferocious air and ground offensive against Hamas fighters and Hezbollah's support activities. Indeed, Israel has been fast to reap the benefits of this intense pressure. The Israel Defense Forces said that one of its aircraft killed Zakaria Abu Momer, a senior member of Hamas Politburo. He was the head of Hamas National Affairs Office and was close to the movement's leader, Yahya Sinwar. After this crushing defeat, Hamas suffered greatly. The Israeli forces were emboldened as a result, and the skirmishes became considerably more violent. Tel Aviv desired to stop the fighting as soon as possible and to evict Hamas and Hezbollah militants from its borders. This was not unique to Israel. Today, U.S. President Joe Biden reiterated his country's support for Israel and stated that the U.S. is prepared to send extra military personnel to the Middle East if required. The United States President advised foreign countries and organizations not to try to profit from the worsening of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Meanwhile, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi condemned the conflict in Gaza between Israel and Hamas as very serious and warned of the ramifications for regional security and stability. Cairo has increased its efforts to broker a ceasefire. Al-Sisi stated that they are in communication with all international and regional stakeholders in order to immediately stop the violence and de-escalate the situation. Following Hamas' unexpected attack on Israel, German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock urged the Palestinian Authority to abandon terrorism. Following these declarations and calls for peace, Israel chose to broaden its campaign against Hamas. The Israel Defense Forces said that they have begun sending thousands of weapons to civilian security groups and defense networks across the country in order to boost small town and settlement defenses. Following these preparations, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant declared that Israel had initiated a large-scale operation against Gaza. Gallant declared that all limitations on troops on the Gaza Strip's border had been abolished. Following this key move, Israeli forces claimed to be regaining control of the area, particularly in the country's south. While Israel's offensive campaign continued, Hamas made a move in this direction as well. In retaliation for Israeli attacks on Gaza, Hamas armed organizations threatened to target the Israeli city of Ashkelon. Following this declaration, the city was rocked by a series of tremendous explosions. Hamas launched massive rockets at Ashkelon. The city was subjected to such a massive attack for the first time in its history. Air raid sirens rang here and in other surrounding communities as a result of the attack. Within minutes, both sides in the conflict zone were launching attacks with such ferocity that they were difficult to follow and report in real time. Another case in point comes from the Gaza Strip. The Israel Defense Forces unleashed huge airstrikes on Gaza City's Fur Khan neighborhood, striking over 100 sites. According to the IDF, this location is a hub of terrorists utilized by Hamas to attack Israel. The enormous strikes involved dozens of fighter jets. The Israeli Defense Forces also discovered an underground tunnel used to smuggle weapons and terror equipment in the Rafah area on the Egyptian-Gaza border. Following all of these spectacular occurrences, one question was raised in the international media. What exactly does Hamas seek to achieve by attacking Israel? Iran wants to avoid this, even if it has stated that a U.S. security guarantee for the Saudis will be an integral aspect of the U.S.-led negotiations on an Israel-Saudi Arabia normalization accord. The Hamas offensive that precipitated the horrific Israeli-Palestinian violence makes it extremely difficult for Riyadh to continue these diplomatic negotiations. Given the cui bono, Iran is the obvious answer. The disagreement over supporting the Assad regime in Syria during the early stages of the civil war, however, serves as evidence that Hamas insists it is not solely an Iranian-controlled militant force. The Hamas leadership recognizes that this massive and terrible attack will be greeted with a massive Israeli military reaction. Neither is the Hamas leadership naive or fanatical enough to imagine that this act will spark a general revolt against Israel. However, given the enormity of the strike, a physical invasion of Gaza and the removal of Hamas from power by Israel are very certainly unavoidable. Such a result is considered the price Hamas will pay to appease Tehran. On the other hand, drawing attention to the Palestinian situation is undoubtedly one of the attack's primary goals. But if that were the main motivation, why would Hamas escalate earlier attacks knowing that Israel's response would cost Hamas control of Gaza? Several other tactics could have earned Hamas the attention it desired without jeopardizing its political position. Repeated bombing raids or rocket strikes might have exacerbated the problem while remaining within agreed-upon parameters. The same can be said of Hamas' assertion of reprisal or revenge. It defies logic to believe that Hamas would organize and prepare a complicated, coordinated strike of this magnitude without considering the next steps. As a result, the primary goal of Hamas' attack may be to incite an Israeli invasion and depose Hamas from power in Gaza. However, the biggest error Hamas or Lebanese Hezbollah can make here is to dismiss U.S. support. The United States has already dispatched its navy to Israel. The most notable example is the USS Gerald Ford. The world's largest aircraft carrier is also on its way to the conflict zone to put an end to the tension. As you can see, even though Hamas and Hezbollah militants continue to combat in the Middle East, Israel, with U.S. help, will eventually disperse this clash atmosphere. In the end, both Hamas, which Iran is attempting to utilize, and Hezbollah terrorists funded by Lebanon and the Iranian government will suffer directly. Thank you for sticking with us.